Winning game one, get absolutely blown out at home in game two by Marcus Smart and the Boston Celtics. Where do the Mavs and Warriors go from here? And then what do we look like now that the Orlando Magic have the number one pick? What should we guess the value is on that number one pick going off the last 10 years? All of that and more on today's edition of Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast. I'm your host today, Adam Matez, and I am joined by Brendon Kleen of Locked On Suns. Brendon, thanks for filling in today on the show.
Yeah, exciting. Wes, I feel bad that he had to watch what just happened out there in Miami, but I'm happy to be here in his place and he can deal with that, and I'll be here for him.
I was checking the timeline as like just kind of getting the notes ready. I'm like, well, let me see what Wes's insight was on the game. Stop tweeting after about the first quarter. And I know that feeling. We all know this one where you're at the game and you're like, wow, okay, I'm out of notes. We still have, I don't know.
Adam, I just covered game 7 of Suns Mavs. Yes, I know that feeling.
Man, that was a tough one. That was a tough one for sure. Hey, we've all had the tough ones. The Miami Heat tonight were the punching bag. But before we get to all of that, today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, so today, no Marcus Smart, no Al Horford in game one. Short-handed Celtics get beat up by Jimmy Butler and the Miami Heat, who sort of had their way, I would say, in game one. But game two, the script flipped. The Heat had a 10-point lead early. You thought, okay, they're filling them out. They're looking pretty good. But the Celtics get a 17-0 run in the first quarter, led by 5 consecutive three-pointers. They go 9 of 11 from 3 in the first quarter. The game was it wasn't over at that point, but momentum was heavily on Boston's side. Second quarter, much like the first quarter, Celtics end up 25 points. Marcus Smart, I thought, was phenomenal. You got great contributions from Brown and Tatum. Peyton Pritchard made an appearance. It was really not a close game, and I don't even know that there were a ton of close notes because of how lopsided this game was, even after the second quarter. Brendon, what's your big takeaway from this beatdown today by the Boston Celtics?
It's starting to feel like this series might just be decided by which team's role players shoot better. I mean, there's shooters on both sides of this thing, and they're both teams that are kind of built around one primary wing scorer and some shooting. I think that's a little rude to Jaylen Brown, but you can follow me there. And, tonight it was the Celtics. You're getting the game from Marcus Smart where he both makes his threes and is creating up. Obviously, guys like Grant Williams and Al Horford who have been making shots all year. Jaylen Brown the same way, doing it his way. And so on the other side, 10 of 34 from deep for Miami, and no one outside of Gabe Vincent really making shots. So that's probably not going to be the only thing that defines the series, but it definitely feels like it's going to be a bellwether going forward.
So you mentioned Marcus Smart's shooting and his playmaking. It was the latter that was the thing that stood out for me today. And I mean, he was fantastic in this game. He was a plus 31 in his game high 40 minutes, 24 points, 9 rebounds, 12 assists, very nearly a triple double. But it was those 12 assists that stand out to me. And it wasn't just that he got them. We've seen him get assists. I thought his control of the game today as a point guard. You don't always think of Marcus Smart as a point guard. Sometimes he feels a scoring guard, a defensive guard, this or that. It was his point guard play tonight that I thought stood out and made all of the difference on that end of the court. The Celtics were in rhythm. I thought they felt very comfortable. And to me, he was the player of the game. They got great contributions from a lot of guys. We're going to talk about Peyton Pritchard, I'm sure, here in a second. But to me, Marcus Smart was the difference. And I was surprised, actually, after game one, how little was discussed about him specifically, and what he means to the team. Because you watch that game and you watch tonight and you go, oh, yeah, completely different team with him doing what he did tonight.
Absolutely. And I mean, that was the case even in the second round, right? Against the Bucks, the Celtics were noticeably worse. And I mean, I think some of it is just they don't have that point guard. I mean, you said he's not always the kind of guy who plays that way, but they don't really have anybody else. Derek White also missed this game, I believe, for the birth of his new child, which is really awesome for him. Wish, maybe should have planned that stuff a little better instead of the playoff run, but he was on the Spurs at the beginning of the season.
Wow, unbelievable. Do you have kids, Brendon? Do you have kids?
I don't have any kids. No.
All right, there you go. You're out of the running. I'm taking you out. I'm taking
It's
you out
okay.
of the running for
Easy for me to
childhood planning. I love it.
Easy for me to say, and I do understand those things are not always perfectly planned to a T. But yeah, I mean, they need somebody to be able to orchestrate the offense, just like you said, control the game, to control the pace, and he was able to do that. I just, on the Miami side, to me, it can be such a frustrating team to watch at times. And I always end up coming back. And I know this is, something we've been struggling with Miami. If you just want to see every team be at their best, that Bam Adebayo is just never quite as aggressive as you want him to be or expect him to be. Only 6 shot attempts today. And they didn't get anybody but Jimmy going. And that's a problem. I mean, it has to be somebody. And if it's not going to be, barnstorming 3-point shooting every night, which is unsustainable. Right. You got to have somebody else step up, and it's just not Bam as often as you might want.
Well, so what's interesting about that for me, we mentioned Marcus Smart. Like, the Celtics have some great shot makers. I mean, obviously Jason Tatum, one of the best tough shot makers. Jaylen Brown, a great tough shot maker. Even Marcus Smart can make some tough shots, but can you get the easy buckets? And tonight, again, I thought Marcus Smart did a great job of generating easy buckets and good buckets. And as a team effort, they moved the ball. They did a great job. You go to the other end of the court, Jimmy Butler is a good tough shot maker. He can also be a great facilitator. But I thought if you could distill this game down to one talking point, the additions of Al Horford and Marcus Smart allowed them the defensive versatility and the switchability, which I thought completely stifled Miami in this game. And if I had a concern, and I did have a concern about Miami coming into these playoffs, it was as great as they can be defensively, as great as they can be and have some great players, there are ways to shut down their offense to make it difficult. I don't think there's anything scarier in playoff basketball than when you cannot score. And tonight they couldn't score, in large part because that switching, I thought, completely took them out of rhythm. So you mentioned Bam Adebayo. There was no offensive rhythm to what the Miami Heat were trying to do today in this game. And I don't know if Bam Adebayo is a great aggressive creator. He can do it in spots, but I think he is more, if the ball is popping and the system is flowing, he can be aggressive in that. If it gets stagnant, if everything gets bogged down, I don't think he can. And to me, if I'm Miami Heat, that's the thing I'm most concerned about. Is I think the Celtics proved tonight, or at least demonstrated tonight, that at their best, they can force you to play half court, and they can force you to have to isolate because they're going to switch and they're going to keep the ball out of the paint. If I'm Miami, that's the thing I'm most concerned about.
Absolutely. And I think that's why you saw, Robert Williams only playing 20 minutes, Al Horford coming back with conditioning, but their team was complete mostly, and it felt that way. And Williams, it's one of those games where the box score is going to lie to you about what he was able to bring for them. And I guess I just wonder, though, Adam, like, who is it for Miami? Because no player really fits the description that you're giving that can beat some of those switches outside of Jimmy. I don't really think of Hero as that type of guy. He's going to get to his spots and kind of shoot over you, but he's not going to explode through aggressive defense necessarily. And I don't know anyone else who will.
I don't know that they're going to get it from an individual. And this is one of the hard parts about Miami. This is not to discount them, but you get to this level of the playoffs, and every level you go further, it's, can you be solved? Can you be figured out? I don't know that the Miami Heat can be solved, but you can force them into the things that they're least comfortable doing. And a lot of that is that self-creation, that dribble penetration. Maybe they can get that from, like an Oladipo or somebody like that. I think you're starting to get a little desperate if you're really relying on that, but maybe that's where they go. But to me, they probably now have to adjust for this switch-heavy scheme and try to play into their tendencies. So if a team is going to switch, you've got to put them in actions that are going to place them at vulnerabilities at the switches, maybe some veer action that's going to get guys setting ball screens and then slipping early before the switch happens, so you create some confusion. And they have guys that are great at doing that. I mean, Strus, I know Duncan Robinson hasn't really played, although he played in garbage time tonight. He's very good at this disguise screen, so when the switch happens, you end up getting out of there quick enough so there's some confusion. You might have to start running some more of those types of actions to try to create open looks. But if I'm being perfectly honest, this is an example, and we'll see how the rest of the series goes. But what I'm saying about Miami is that's not something they're going to be comfortable doing. That's not a winning philosophy. If I look at Boston, I think they still have more cards up their sleeve. There's more paths, in my opinion, for them to get through this series than there are Miami.
Yeah, I think you're touching on exactly what I think Heat fans are probably scared of, and for the Celtics to be able to win a road game and still, like you said, have some cards to play and still be getting healthy, frankly. I don't know if Marcus Smart's foot sprain will go away at any point, if it's just something he's going to have to continue to deal with. But Robert Williams getting back, Horford hopefully getting back from whatever level of conditioning he lost. He was only out a couple days. It feels like the Celtics are in the driver's seat. But again, a 25-point game, and I don't necessarily think people might not have made it to the Duncan Robinson minutes. But we wanted to talk a little bit about what game 2 of the Western Conference Finals might look like, and rank the odds or percentile chance of the remaining 4 teams in their championship pedigree here. We'll do that after we hear from Built Bar. It's a protein bar that tastes just like a candy bar. Locked On listeners know and love Built Bar already. You might have heard of the Built Bar Puff, which is the first ever protein-infused marshmallow, but they are reinventing the game yet again with a new flavor, the Brownie Batter Puff. We all love brownies. Everybody, if you don't love brownies, I don't really know what to tell you, but you love even more that experience. It's not even so much the flavor, it's the experience. It's the nostalgia of dipping that finger in, dipping that spoon in, and licking the bowl clean with brownie batter. And Built has turned that into a protein bar. They do this stuff, and I don't know how they do it, but it's only 140 calories. It's only 7 grams of sugar, and it's packed with 17 grams of protein. All Built Puffs covered in 100% real chocolate, which means you can enjoy it anytime. I mean, I'm in Phoenix, so things are getting hot. It's just exhausting to leave the house at this point, and so I'm looking for a snack that's going to be healthy, just for no good reason at all, because in the 4 o'clock hour, it feels like death, and I just want something to pick me up, but also maybe you're a workout person. Maybe you want something before or after you go to the gym. Whatever it might be, Built Bar is there for you, and the Brownie Batter Puff will have you completely forgetting that you're even eating a protein bar at all. Go to Built.com, folks. Use the promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your next order. That's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com.
Back here for segment 2 of the Locked On NBA podcast. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. Make sure to check out Locked On NBA Big Board. Host Rafael Barlow from NBA Draft Junkies and author of the NBA Big Board newsletter is joined by Richard Stamen, Sam Ferris, and Leif Thulin, giving fans an in-depth look into the NBA draft, mock draft player rankings, and of course, Big Boards. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts this time of year. You can't get enough of that NBA draft stuff. It's right around the corner. So check them out, NBA Big Board. So, all right, let's get into it. The other series, also a laugher. I mean, the NBA is really – the first 2 rounds have been great. Third round off to a little bit of a tough start so far with a pair of blowouts. But, what stood out to you, and really what are you looking for most as the Mavs try to get back into the series in Game 2?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, as I joked at the beginning, I'm coming off covering this Mavericks team and their 7-game series in the second round against the Suns. And, I mean, selfishly, what I took away is it is possible to make this Mavericks team look human. They are not the best team ever to play basketball like they look in Games 6 and 7.
Right.
I think the thing is, to me, the Warriors defense is just something that Dallas hasn't faced. I think that's kind of the bottom line to me is them being able to, and it's both ends. They're a very different team than the Suns and the Jazz. The Suns and Jazz were pretty similar types of matchups for Dallas, and I think that's why they were able to kind of gain steam as those series went along. The Warriors are very different, but I think it's really that offensive attack, and just were able to go at some of the sore spots in that Dallas rotation. They were able to really pull the Dallas defense apart. Some of those on-ball defenders and just havoc that Finney-Smith and Bullock were able to create against Devin Booker and Chris Paul. It's just a very different thing to try to do to guard all of the the early offense, the early action that the Warriors do. And it didn't even feel like any one player had an awesome night in this game. I know the Mavs missed some threes, but they're going to need to adjust what they're trying to do on defense if they want to contain what the Warriors are doing.
And the Warriors, when they get in their rhythm, I mean, it's like the Celtics tonight. And that's one thing you could even say about the Celtics game is they're probably not going to make 9 out of their first 11 3-pointers to open a game, and that changes the texture. Similar things could be said about Golden State, although we know at Chase Center they tend to do that more often than just about anyone, get hot early on in the game. But I think it is interesting to look at Boston. I know they were shorthanded coming off a 7-game series, and Dallas coming off of a 7-game series, both looking really flat in their first games. Boston bounced back. I do think that you probably see a much more competitive game. But for me, it all starts and stops with Luka. There's other pieces of this, but Luka looked like the greatest player in the NBA in games 6 and 7 of that Western Conference semifinal. I mean, he was that good. He really seemed to have solved the Phoenix Suns. Meaning, like, as you went through that series, you could see game by game, he started to piece things together. Where's the help coming from? What are they looking to do? And he just couldn't be bothered down the stretch of that series. He was very bothered in game 1. He looked uncomfortable. He looked about as bad as we had seen him. And so for me, that's the thing I'm looking at. I'm sure fatigue played a little bit of a factor. I'm sure the unfamiliarity of going from a Phoenix Suns team to a Golden State team, two very, very different stylistic defenses. I'm sure that's a little bit different. But to me, that's the number one thing I'm looking at. Does Luka start to solve things in game 2? Even if they don't win, does he start to solve some things and figure it out to, okay, that's how they're going to get a crack in the armor?
Yeah, I feel like you would definitely expect him to. And I think he had 1 or 2 combined turnovers in game 6 and 7. He had 7 in game 1. That's uncharacteristic for even him, even though he can be, loose, and they do spray the ball around. He plays a style it's going to get you some of those turnover nights, but you're not going to average 7 for a series. I also think the Mavs, they're at their best, even if it's uncomfortable to them. They're at their best when they at least pick up the pace a bit. And in this game, Golden State completely controlled the pace. Another thing that they're more likely to do at home. And we all know that. And then, the other thing is, speaking of the differences with these teams, you were talking about what the Suns were giving him. They were giving him mostly whatever the heck he wanted at times in that series. And the Warriors weren't even giving a switch, let alone the switch Luka wanted. So when Luka tried to attack, they were hedging, they were recovering, they were rotating on the back, something that the Suns just never really got the hang of. And they were letting him go at Chris Paul, go at Campaign, whatever it was. Luka's going to, again, adjust and be able to kind of pick maybe, look to be a little more pass heavy, look to be running some different types of stuff, maybe lean less on those isolation attacks that he can just kind of score at will on and methodically kind of mesh some things out a little bit.
One of the things, this is kind of a side note, or maybe I'm taking us on a little journey here, but one of the things I'm really interested in, Phoenix was so good from the mid-range, really the last 2 years. It's been a large part of their identity. And much has been made about the math equation and this or that. But I think one of the things that was interesting was Dallas was great defensively in large part because of how they could shrink the court, play inside, and run out on guys. And when you're playing a mid-range game, or when you rely heavily on a mid-range game, that job becomes a little bit easier from a defensive standpoint. I'm not trying to argue the merits of whether you should or shouldn't. I know that's been argued a million times on every basketball podcast over the last decade. But defensively, I do think there is something to, if you do start to emphasize, okay, they like to get to the elbows and take shots, versus now you've got Steph Curry and Klay Thompson on the wing. All of these rotations now become an extra couple steps. You get stretched so thin, and that's where you start to break and give up everything. And I thought in game 1, that's what I saw from Dallas. It was almost, they got whiplash from going from a mid-range heavy team to all of a sudden a team that stretches you out so much further. And that's the thing I'm so curious about. They've been a great defense all year. I'm curious if they can adjust from that, tight spacing defense that they played in the last round to all of a sudden now we've got to cover a lot of ground. My hunch is that they probably can't, but I don't know. They've been a good defensive team all year, so I'm kind of curious to follow that specific thing. What did you see? You watched Phoenix for the last 2 years. They were great in the mid-range. I just thought that as that series went on, they got more and more contested mid-range and more difficulty getting those shots they love.
If you're relying on getting to your spots as part of what you want to do on offense, getting to the spots you're comfortable at the mid-range, Dallas can take that away. They're also really quick. And one thing that they started to do more and more with those blitzes and hedges in the later stages of that series was they were able to use Dwight Powell to get out and move his feet and make Devin Booker get the ball up, make Devin Booker force him into bad decisions. And they were able to just use their personnel and, like you said, shrink the floor, make guys uncomfortable. And The Suns didn't have answers. I mean, it's easy to say when your point guard falls apart, but the Suns didn't have answers. I think the Warriors have many more of them. I mean, they have, Jordan Poole off the bench who can play 30 minutes and you don't even feel like you're missing a beat at all. It's a very different series.
That style, I mean, both of the teams can play where they stretch you out 5 out, but we just know the Warriors, it's so much scarier when the guys on the outside are Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and Jordan Poole. I mean, those guys they put panic into you. So, all right, Brendon, I'm going to put you on the hot seat. You got to put percentages on here. You have 100% to deal with. This isn't a thing where you're going to have to do a little math here. You have 100% to deal with. We're going to divvy this up. Let's start with the Dallas Mavericks. What odds do you give them of winning the NBA? Larry O'Brien, as of right now, they're down 0-1 in the conference finals.
Yeah, not a lot. I don't want to overreact to game one, but I mean, 15%.
Okay, that's not that bad. That's actually pretty fair.
Yeah, I mean, 25 each it would be an average, right? So 15, I think that they're substantially below average. I don't think they'll get through this series, and they would have to win another one. So I'll put them at 15.
The Luka piece of this is just so interesting. The thing that I think about the Mavs is maybe more so than any other team, I think less of the matchup and just more about, are they good enough to get through it? Meaning, if they are somehow to beat the Warriors, whoever they face in the other side, it's almost like their odds are the same. They do what they do, and we'll see if Luka can overcome it. So, all right, 15. What does that mean for the Warriors? What percentage are you giving the Warriors?
That is a good question. I will go 30 for the Warriors. So
man, I am really curious to see the rest of this breakdown. Wow. Yeah. Warriors 30%. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So then should I go who next?
So you love them. I'm guessing you love them in this series, but you kind of like the Eastern Conference a little heavier. So all right, let's go Miami Heat. Let's go Miami Heat now.
So I've done 45%. So
that's right.
Let me go 20% for Miami.
So they have a better chance, in your opinion, than the Dallas Mavericks do.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, they are 1-1 in the series, so that probably gives them the extra 5%, I guess, that alone. That means, what do we have here? What are we at? 50, 65%. So you got a 35% chance on the Celtics. Is that right?
Yeah. I just think, I mean, what it is with Boston for me is what they've been able to do now against two teams that might have been two of the 4 or 5 other best teams in the NBA heading into the playoffs. And they've kind of, I mean, if you even count game 1 for Boston, they outplayed the Heat for the first half. And then the third quarter, they were undone, and the fourth quarter wasn't really close. So, 6 out of 8 quarters, they've outplayed Miami, and they're headed home. They're headed home. I think their defense combined with their multiple weapons on offense, I think they should be the favorite right now.
In the standings, are the Celtics ahead of the Warriors? Do you know overall? You never really look at conference. Let me see. No, Warriors are actually
2 games up.
Yeah. 2 games up, so they actually would have home court in a finals.
That's right.
I think I'm going to switch those with you, and I'm going to go 35 Warriors, 30 Celtics. I would probably also switch Heat and Mavs and give 20% to Mavs and 15% to Heat. The Mavs have Luka, and it honestly just comes down to that. I just think he's so great that I don't think he will do it, but I think he is capable of doing it. As great as Jimmy Butler has been, and this has been like some of the best basketball of his career, which is kind of wild to say, I still think it's a level down from there. But I'm with you. I think the Celtics and Warriors are the 2 teams that best do what they do regardless of how you try to stop them. For Boston, that's largely on the defensive end of the floor. They can stop you. They can figure out how to get a stop. And on the Warriors, even though they are great defensively, to me, it's still a little bit more their system. They can get to it. And if they match up, I think it'll be a great final. So we're close. We're in the same ballpark, but I think we flip the numbers just a little bit. Why don't we take a break? Go ahead.
It's exciting to see the Warriors just play different teams. We saw them play the Rockets and the Cavs over and over and over. It's fun. Right. It's fun to see different teams. But yes, on the other side of the break, we're going to power rank. I'm a guest here, but I've heard that you guys power rank on Friday Locked On NBA shows. We're going to power rank past 10 number 1 overall picks to give a sense of what Orlando is in for in terms of what can they expect to get out of the guy that they get number 1, regardless of who that is. What's the value been like over the past 10 years? We'll get to that on the other side. First, though, guys, Today's show also brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is the #1 source for all your sports betting needs and info throughout the sports calendar. Find all the latest odds, news. They have podcasts. They have articles, everything at BetOnline. Let's see. We were just talking about who is most likely in our minds to win the championship, but let's see what BetOnline has here in terms of odds. I would imagine it's going to look fairly similar. NBA series props, NBA. Let's see here. Oh, Dallas. Wow. The Warriors winning in 5 is the most likely outcome according to BetOnline bettors. That is rough news. Yeah, that is rough news for Mavs fans. Ooh, this one is near and dear to my heart in a very terrible way. DeAndre Ayton's next team, if it's not the Suns, the team that I cover, Detroit Pistons +125. Yeah, they have a lot of cap space.
Huh? That would be
a lot of cap space.
Yeah.
That's all the kind of stuff you can find at BetOnline. Everything. I mean, it's constantly updated. We're getting emails in our inboxes to tell you guys about stuff basically every single day. Where's this guy going to go? Which team's going to win this? We're going to hire this coach. It's constant. And that's just basketball. They have odds, news, all of it across every single sport, including live betting. So head to the website today. That's betonline.net, or use their mobile app to learn more about the latest trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts.
All right, back here, final segment, Locked On NBA Friday edition. And as we always do on Fridays, we power rank something silly, because power rankings are really dumb, and it's fun to do something dumb right before you head into your weekend. So we're going to power rank, Brendon, the 10 #1 draft picks of the last 10 years, because, as you mentioned, the Orlando Magic have won the lottery. They get the #1 pick. Is that a guaranteed good thing? Is it, what can you expect from it? I made a list. You can kind of grade me on mine. Number 10, this is the easiest of all of them, including #1. The easiest was to give number 10, and that was, of course, Anthony Bennett. You might even forget. I wonder how many people listening to this show, it's only been, 8 years since the Anthony Bennett pick or whatever, but I wonder how many people have forgotten him or could pick him out of a lineup.
Oh, I definitely don't know what he looks like. I don't think I would know if I saw him somewhere. I definitely know the name because that was like the beginning of the tanking era. That's what I'll always remember that draft for, is everybody was tanking, and then the reward was Anthony Bennett.
Well, the Cavs won. What did they get? 3 out of 4 first picks. It's like at some point you have to get a bad one, and Anthony Bennett.
And
was
the one
that
they
guy.
missed out on might be our #1 here, which is the funny part.
So Anthony Bennett's the worst one. I can't believe you start to get into some pretty good players. This is going to be such a controversial list. Number 9 for me, Markelle Fultz. I think he might be this. Now he's 5 levels up from Anthony Bennett. He's still in the NBA, but I mean, his career has not gone very well. He's not on the team that drafted him anymore. And I think his odds of becoming like a star player are just about 0 at this point of his career, even though he's still young. I don't know. To me, he's pretty low there. Any arguments with Markelle Fultz? Are you still a believer?
No, the Wikipedia page for the past NBA #1 overall draft picks has their box score averages, and he's at 7, 3, and 4. So yeah, oof. I think that says what you need to know.
Man, what was it? What's Anthony Bennett at? Did they even have his
4,
stats on
3, and 0.3?
Oh, 0.3. You could count the total number of assists he has, probably. Rough. You start to get into some good players here. This one's a little controversial. These next two are a little controversial. I got number 8, Andrew Wiggins, and number 7, Ben Simmons. I have Ben Simmons ahead of Andrew Wiggins. I could feel really dumb about this, I think, in like a year's time. Andrew Wiggins is a great story to me. Like, the thing about Andrew Wiggins is he was a star player, famously traded away. He's not included in LeBron's letter. He was shipped out before he even stepped on a court, shipped to Minnesota. Didn't work out in Minnesota, as so many draft picks don't. And then now here he is in Golden State. What's crazy is he's playing like a winner. I mean this sincerely. It's not that he's making shots, although he is doing that as well. He's grabbing rebounds. He's grabbing loose balls. He's defending star players. Andrew Wiggins is not that old. And the fact that he is like not just like a good, talented player, but that he is playing like a high-level role player. I know that sounds like an insult, but it's not. The fact that he's doing this is just so impressive to me.
Yeah, I think it's getting tough already with the power ranking, but with Wiggins especially, I just, one of my lasting memories so far of the playoffs was him making the closing play in Game 6 against Memphis, just getting in the passing lane, getting a steal and a breakaway dunk in a key moment, and those guys were pumping him up to infinity, like just that, just smacking him on the chest, yelling in his face, like it was a cool moment to just see like he's a part of a massively successful team. And he's the type of role player any team in the NBA would want to have. Now, maybe not on that contract. It's nice to be able to be the Warriors and pay him that. But who wouldn't want to have this version of Andrew Wiggins in a vacuum right now? He's a great two-way player.
Now, what about having him or having Ben Simmons ahead of him here? I mean, Ben Simmons is a better player when he plays.
All NBA guy. I think I mean, if he plays and he's anywhere close to what he was, I think he earns that spot. But if he doesn't, or if he's never quite the same, then, if we did this ranking in another year after the next number one overall pick in the lottery, maybe it's different.
Yeah. Number 6, DeAndre Ayton. Throw aside a second that Luka was there and Trey and, maybe some of these other guys. But if you just think, again, DeAndre Ayton's value, like to me, he's right there in the middle of the last 10. He's like he's the average number 1 pick over the last 10. I think he's great. Went out kind of sad. I mean, high profile, only 17 minutes and some argumentation. And what was Monte? What did he say? It's
internal.
Internal. Yeah. It's internal. Yeah, it's internal. Why he didn't finish the game. But Ayton's a really, really, really good player. And I think if the Orlando Magic were offered right now, like, hey, whoever you pick at number 1 is going to have a DeAndre Ayton level impact, I think they would probably take it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, especially considering he's one of the more recent guys on this list, all things considered.
Right.
Going back 10 years, he was only a pick 4 years ago. He's going to get better. So, yeah, you would love to have a guy like that if you're Orlando.
And when you get a guy at number 1, you have that guy for 7-8 years. As you know, I'm sorry, I'm just teasing you here. I think DeAndre Ayton might be done in Phoenix. We'll find out. Right ahead of DeAndre Ayton, and I can't believe I slotted him ahead of him here, but I actually, if I redid this, my own list that I made today, if I would probably swap these two guys. But who I have number 5, Karl-Anthony Towns. Do you have Towns or Ayton ahead? How would you break that up?
It's the Towns thing is going to start to get fascinating if they are going to stay in the mix in the Western Conference, because Ayton wasn't great in that second round, but the previous 5 playoff series that he played in, he was a difference maker from the jump in the playoffs on both ends, frankly, and upped his level of intensity and, execution and all that stuff was a big part of why the Suns made the finals and won 64 games this year and won the first round this year and all that. Towns, he's starting to get a track record in the postseason, and it's not a great one so far. It's very little to judge him on, but, at a certain point, that's going to start to be what we think of him more so than whatever he does in the regular season or winning the 3-point contest or any of that stuff. Right. So, I mean, his defense and decision-making and all that stuff that kind of had some warts on it, it's going to start to get under the microscope.
And
I would probably still have Towns higher, though. I think what he does, the degree of difficulty is just higher, and you probably prioritize that. If you're just doing a draft of these 10 guys, you probably get, you get those whatever the money bag eyes that the duck. Right. What's the duck guy? He gets in his eyes. That's what you want. Scrooge.
The thing about Towns versus Ayton is that Towns is asked to do more. But I think he's more of a star. We're going to give the ball to him. We're going to play through him. He's the cornerstone, whatever. Whereas Ayton, fits into what is, a style of play. The thing is, I think we discount sometimes the fact that a lot of players of Ayton's caliber wouldn't agree to such a small role. Yeah. I think it's actually impressive of him that he says, I can do more, but I'm willing to do less. I think now in hindsight, it probably would have been smarter to develop the ability to play through him a little bit more. But nonetheless, I'm always impressed with talented players when they're willing to sacrifice early in their careers for the greater good. And so those two guys are really, really neck and neck. Just depends on what you value. Number 4 for me, Anthony Edwards. Yes, ahead of Karl-Anthony Towns. I'm sorry, I'm taking him. If I had to build a team between one of those two guys, I'm taking Anthony Edwards. He shows up number 4 on my list.
I love it. I think Edwards is a star. I think he's going to continue to prove himself. I think the fact that he did what he did at, what is he, 20, and already was, leading an offense late in playoff games. And there's quotes from people in that organization on the record kind of saying like, yeah, he's barely even anything. He's a baby deer out there a lot of the time. And he's already doing that. I think his explosiveness, his shot making, he looked better defensively in the first playoff action we saw him in than I expected, at least on the ball and just kind of holding up man to man. I think he's just going to continue to get better. And another one like Ayton, where he's so young, you're forecasting more than you are with Wiggins or Towns.
His competitive spirit, I know this can become cliche, but to me, he to me is a guy that I think is just going to get more and more competitive. The more he gets into this, the more pressure he puts on himself. And I have to factor that in. He's a guy, I think he's a foxhole guy, and will be for Minnesota for years to come. All right, the top three were so hard here. Really, really hard. This guy probably should be number one, but he's number three in large part because of some of the intangible stuff. Zion Williamson. He's number three. If you would have asked me this 18 months ago, easily number one, easily. But the truth is he's had some injuries. He's had the weight problem. I mean, he just never seems to be able to get himself into shape. And then also just a little bit of weirdness. Is he connected to that team? It seems like he maybe hasn't been the greatest teammate. I know it's very early. There's time to remedy this and to kind of change and flip the script. But I have to factor that into it. So he fell. He should have been number one. I think he's the most talented, the most dominant, the most upside of all the guys. But I had to drop him to three based on those three things: injuries and weight and maybe his buy-in so far.
And I would say all three of those things are connected to the side of the ball that we just haven't seen him impact at a very high level yet. Yeah. I think if he figures out some of that stuff in terms of his body, his physicality, his athleticism, and frankly, his buy-in, and, maybe getting to that second contract and committing or even before that, just seeing the way that the Pelicans were able to win at a high level this year will engage him more. And all three of those things would make him be a better defender, I think. So that's the other side you want to see. But I mean, man, his talent's undeniable. He scored in bunches as a second-year player, made an all-star team. And I mean, his ceiling is, I don't even think our eyes work as high up as it probably is.
It's almost under-discussed just how much that Pelicans team created an identity, discovered an identity, cultivated an identity that just doesn't include him because he's so good. And you think it's so hard to just say you add him to that roster because I don't know where he fits on that roster. It changes everything about him. And, he's so talented. You trust that you'll be able to figure it out over time, but it's just such a weird story. A guy with that much talent that has basically taken himself out of the conversation. Some of this obviously through injuries, but next year, a big year for him, in my opinion. Number two, the hardest one because he's a rookie this year, Cade Cunningham. I think Zion's more talented. Anthony Edwards end up being more, I might be wrong and he belongs higher, but Cade Cunningham to me looks like an all-around player, defense, offense, passing, scoring, inside, outside, three-level scorer. To me, he just looks so dynamic, so well-rounded. He got the number two spot for me.
Yeah, I was surprised to hear you as high on Cade as you were, just because we saw 64 games. That's not nothing, but I've loved him since Oklahoma State. I mean, you talk about a guy who we were getting to this with some of the Celtics conversation and the Heat and control over the game. What you're able to do as a wing creator, as a perimeter playmaker in the NBA, just impacting and influencing every moment that your team has the ball without being dominant to the point of being called a ball hog or upsetting your teammates or any of that. It's such a fine line to walk, and Cade's just always had that. I mean, the assist numbers, the things like that are never really going to show his impact. I love him. I think he's going to be a great player, but very, very early. So some of these other guys just have the track record that Cade doesn't have because he hasn't had the chance to.
If you had to pick between Anthony Edwards or Cade Cunningham to start a franchise, who would you pick?
I think I would pick Ant just because of the mentality that you were talking about. And it's not to say Cade doesn't have it, but I just want to go with the guy who has the talent and just has that FU to him right away. That's that. But I have a soft spot for Ant.
I think Cade might have it as well. It's so early. I think he might have it as well, but it's an interesting argument. I think you would get a lot of different answers if you pulled a lot of different people.
Hey, that Pistons team was winning games late in the year that they probably shouldn't have. So we already start to saw it. Yeah, for sure.
The number one spot for me was Anthony Davis. I mean, at his best, Anthony Davis is, a top 5-6 player in the NBA, two-way player, great shooter. There's obviously questions about his ability to stay healthy. There's questions about his sort of buy-in. I mean, we've seen him literally quit on his team before when he was trying to get out. But you can't deny the talent and the versatility of talent that fits the modern NBA. To me, Zion is right there if he were to play and to stay healthy. But to me, Anthony Davis, the number one pick of the last 10 years.
Yeah, I think you can't go wrong there. That was 10 was easy. Anthony Bennett, Anthony Davis was a shoo-in for me too. I mean, when he's at his best on both ends, the league has never really seen anything like that. Guarding Russell Westbrook and James Harden in the bubble, guarding Nikola Jokic in the bubble, and then hitting perimeter shots to win late playoffs. He's a monster, and he gets it done on both ends, and he's filled out his game so well. And I know nobody likes the Lakers, but if he can get healthy, I think we all should be rooting for that, because watching that dude is something else.
So if you want some analytics here, we just did the eye test, but if you want some analytics here, 4 of the last 10 number 1 draft picks have Anthony in their name. You've got Anthony Bennett, you've got Karl Anthony Towns, you have Anthony Edwards, and you have Anthony Davis. So there's your data analytics if you want to get into the weeds there. That does it for the Friday edition of the Locked On NBA show. You can check out Brendon Kleen on Locked On Suns if you want to hear a fountain of sadness after a meltdown of a season. You can check me out over on Locked On Nuggets, while I am also a fountain of sadness as I sweat out the Nuggets losing Tim Conley to the Minnesota Timberwolves. Talked about that today on Thursday's edition of Locked On Nuggets, so you can check that out. And you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, whether it's Spotify, Apple, iTunes, anywhere. We're on all of those platforms. Thanks so much for tuning in. Have a great weekend.